So I've read this article before in the past, a few years ago, and this will play into Project 2025, I think. And so abortion bans exposed white anxiety about the reproduction of people of color, which, in my opinion, not just abortion bans, but I believe immigration. They don't want to see more people of color coming in because white people are just a small percentage of nations that are aging and shrinking anyways. So, I mean, most of the brain gain is from immigrants and probably darker people, etc. So, and and so this harms their rhetoric that white people are superior, and so they'll fight back, of course, no matter what delusion they see. So, abortion bans, immigration bans, trans bans, gay bans, this all cements into the ultimate boogeyman, probably, where it's the gay, uh, uh, the gay immigrant, so person of color. You could see how that would be a person that would be easily targeted. Okay, the recent spate of anti abortion legalization is rooted in white extinction anxiety and carries a long tradition of white people controlling the lives and production of people of color. So, within other nations that are declining and shrinking, this isn't just a white people thing. Japan, for instance, they don't want any immigrants, and that's why they're resorting to automation, like automated nurses, because they're not willing to take in immigration. So, just putting that out there. It's not just a white people racism thing, but we're talking about America. But I could see how somebody might, forget and assume because America puts itself globally, and so our values come off as the white values. Okay, last year, white people constituted 60% of the U.S. population, down from about 90% in 1950. It's projected that by 2050 they will be the new minority and people of color will be the majority. Uh, Nightmarish prediction to some white people. Senator Lindsey Graham voiced his concern of a demographic delusion of the 2012 Republican convention when he said, quote, "The demographics race we're losing badly. Republicans are not generating enough angry white guys to stay in business for a long term, for the long term." Graham's comments relay what social scientists and anti-racism activists call white extinction anxiety, or fear of white genetic annihilation. The idea that white people could go the way of the dinosaur has been dismissed by some as simply pity of personal circumstance or conspiracy theory, but the convergent effects of new laws banning abortion together with old laws promoting mass incarceration of black and brown people suggests that this white fear is not just an idea, but the catalyst for public policy. There indeed appears to be a strong correlation between the demographic projections, the fear of white genetic annihilation, and the recent wave of abortion bills. Anti-racism activist and diversity trainer Jane Elliott described it as a fear so great that white people, including political leaders, quote, "will do anything to see that doesn't happen." Hyper-punitive abortion legislation recently passed in Alabama bans the procedure outright except in cases of risk to the woman's health, and in Georgia, a woman who obtains an abortion will spend the rest of her life in prison. Of 212 lawmakers in Alabama, Georgia, whose writers ushered in the most restrictive abortion laws we've seen yet, 211 are white. So, this article is older, by the way. As I've mentioned, I read this article like a couple years ago in my Grooming for the Birthrate, because that's what I believe that the far right has been doing for quite some time now, honestly. Okay, what drives all of this is nothing as philosophical as religion. It's not faith, it's not principle, it's the fear of genetic dominance of black and brown people. The late Francis Cress Westing, psychiatrist and author of the ISIS Papers, The Keys to the Colors and the Cress Theory of Color Confrontation and Racism, is well known for her theory of black and brown genetic dominance over white recessive gene. Quote, people of color have the capacity to genetically annihilate white people, she explained, and unless white people control the reproduction of people of color, we can postulate that perhaps one day there will be any white people. There won't be any white. Oh, wow. But Westling was not the only one who held this belief. Her contemporary demographer Ben Wattenberg wrote in his book, The Birthrate, that the main problem in the United States is low numbers of white births. Wattenberg believed that white people, without a change of course, would lose the numerical majority in the U.S. and would no longer be the white man's land. He proposed 3 ways to address this: pay women to have babies, increase the number of immigrants, and prevent abortions. The first 2, he wrote, aren't the answer because they would also increase the number of black and brown babies. But the third, he posited, would solve the birthrate problem because 60% of abortions are performed by white women because they can afford it generally. The long-standing framework that once defined a woman's reproduction rights as essentially her own prerogative is being zealously deconstructed to, in effect, an increase of white births over time. Not unlike the legal maneuvering that effectively made a person property under American chattel slavery, these anti-abortion laws, to variable degrees, take ownership of women's reproductive rights, in essence, forcibly breeding white women to produce at higher rates. So, there is this sort of echo effect that slavery still has, where women of color still have premature babies, and so they are possibly looking for abortions because for most of history they have been slave bred to have more children, because obviously they weren't just going to go back and forth to Africa. Obviously there was multiple ships, but their slave breeding was a thing, and so black and brown people are just resisting this. They don't want to be forced to have children, but at the same time, they do want to keep their families strong and aware once they do have children. Alright. The war on drugs and tough on crime laws have also made a long-lasting and devastating impact on black and brown communities. The most significant being the loss of reproductive rights, even as some forms of marijuana have been legalized or decriminalized in most states. Many black and brown men and some women are incarcerated at higher rates than white people for the same offenses, and in many cases serve longer sentences. Sociologist James Ullison suggests that the practice of eugenics didn't disappear after World War II, but was merely repackaged, he writes, in The New Eugenics, Black Hyper-Incarceration and Human Abatement. These imprisonment exerts a prophylactic effect on reproduction, and because minorities are incarcerated in disproportionately higher numbers, they're most dramatically affected. In fact, for black males, the effect of hyper-incarceration might be so great as to depress overall reproduction rates, producing a de facto new eugenics. In Garber versus Hickman, a California district court held that incarceration of inmates encompasses and restricts the right to procreate. That incarceration not only hinders but also extinguishes reproductive rights and may influence overall fertility rates. Birth rates across demographics have slowed, but the recent abortion bans favor a fearful white populace. The black economic oppression, along with mass incarceration of mostly black men, means black births are likely to continue their decline. Now, as women are under threat of death or life in prison, the bans could forcibly increase white births under the hope of generating an uptick in the national white demographic. Still, in the foreseeable future, the country will be, as Eliot puts it, mostly brown. Alright. coming to this now. So, I've already read some of this in one of my latest videos. So, but I didn't get to the key proposals. So, government. Project 2025 proposes that the entire federal bureaucracy, including independent agencies such as the Department of Justice, be placed under direct presidential control, a controversial idea known as unitary executive theory. Yes, Trump has wanted to be a dictator for quite some time now, and I think he has joked about it in the past. In practice, that would streamline decision-making, allowing the president to directly implement policies in a number of areas. The proposals also call for eliminating job protections for thousands of government employees, who could then be replaced by political appointees. The document labels the FBI a bloated and arrogant, increasingly lawless organization. It calls for drastic overhauls of this and several other federal agencies, as well as the complete elimination of the Department of Education. The Republican Party platform includes a proposal to declassify government records, root out wrongdoers, and fire corrupt employees, pledges to slash regulation and government spending, and also suggests eliminating the Department of Education. But it stops short of proposing a sweeping overhaul of federal agencies as outlined in Project 2025. So, this is my conspiracy theory here based on the education overhaul. So, based in eugenic ideology, they don't like education because it skews the fertility to some social dynamics. So this isn't inherent, but eugenicists like to mostly focus this on women's education. And so if there's a lack of that, they might get into situations where they have children and not know what's consent and what's not. And so I believe this is a fertility cult attack on women, honestly, for real. Okay, immigration. Increased funding for a wall on the U.S.-Mexico border, one of Trump's signature proposals in 2016, is proposed in the document. Project 2025 also proposes dismantling the Department of Homeland Security and combining it with other immigration enforcement units in other agencies, creating a much larger and more powerful border policing operation. Other proposals include eliminating visa categories for crime and human trafficking victims, increasing fees on immigrants, and allowing fast-tracking applications for migrants who pay a premium. Not all of those details are repeated in the Republican platform document, but the overall headlines are similar. The party is promising to implement the largest deportation program in American history. So, Biden sort of helped with this by, like most Republicans who do a thing, Democrats just continue it, and Biden continued Title 42 long after it was really necessary. And so he, for a quick moment, attacked asylum, and then he sort of was just like, actually, guys, you can come on in. So I think he's just, at this, we all know that Biden's going to lose, and he doesn't seem very consistent to be in opposition to the Republican base, because he was just doing what the Republicans were doing. Again, Democrats are always doing this, continuing red carpeting for the conservatives. Okay, climate and economy. The document proposals slashing federal money for research and investment in renewable energy and calls for the next president to stop the war on oil and natural gas, which essentially just means steamrolling over native land. So, carbon reduction goals would be replaced by efforts to increase energy production and energy security. The paper sets out two competing visions on tariffs and is divided on whether the next president should try to boost free trade or raise barriers to import. But the economic advisor suggests that the second Trump administration should slash corporate income taxes, abolish the Federal Reserve, and even consider a return to the gold-backed currency. So, I don't think this is necessarily needed at this moment, but with the dollar in debt and teetering back and forth based on the algorithmic faith that people have for the stock market, so there's other competing proxies like BRICS that are aware how the IMF has put the world in debt, including the world's poor, creating this uh, property like it's all like an aesthetical issue for them at this point with how the dollar has put everything into debt. While at the same time it's an outsourcing issue and it's trying to really find the right timing with automation, which I don't really think it's working together comfortably enough to really make that happen. All right. Um, on this and many other topics, Project 2025 is more detailed and goes further than the official Republican platform, which talks of bringing down inflation and drilling for oil to reduce energy costs, but is thin on specific policy proposals. Abortion and family. Project 2025 does not call outright for the nationwide abortion ban. However, it proposes withdrawing the abortion pill mifepristone from the market and using existing but little enforced laws to stop the drug from being sent through the post. So, does this mean the post as in through the mail? That would actually mean the Comstock laws are back because Margaret Sanger fought the Comstock laws that um, they made it so that you couldn't get like birth control through the mail. And so this sounds like through the post sounds like this is attacking contraception through the mail, which is actually a pretty crazy move. Okay, the document suggests that the Department of Health and Human Services should maintain a biblically based, social science reinforced definition of marriage and family. On this issue, at least, the document differs fairly substantially from the Republican platform, which only mentions the word abortion once. The platform says abortion laws should be left to individual states and that the late term abortions, which it does not define, should be banned. So, trigger laws were states' rights, and it's just not even being a euphemism by saying states' rights, essentially, by saying like a state's decision. So that's kind of messed up. It adds that access to prenatal care, birth control, and in vitro fertilization should be protected. So this is kind of fucked up because Republicans withheld it nationally and they're only allowing it in certain states to protect their voter base for future generational voters. So I think that it's just, again, it's a fertility cult strategy for them. Um, Anyways, tech and education. Under the proposals, pornography would be banned and tech and telecom companies that allow access would be shut down. The documents calls for school choice and parental choice over schools and takes aim at what it calls woke propaganda. Now, this has been happening for a while, I think, with Moms for Liberty and just like basic censorship that's been happening before Project 2025 was really being like talked about. So we're screwed before this was steamrolling. It it proposes to eliminate a long list of terms from laws and federal regulations including sexual orientation, gender equality, abortion, and reproductive rights. I'm surprised reproductive rights wasn't first because this is all about attacking reproductive freedom. Like not wanting kids is a reproductive freedom. Okay, so when we think of freedom, like uh, pro-choice, it's usually an abortion rhetoric, but it should be to or not to have children. But that's not what it was captured in the neoliberal wordplay. All right. Project 2025 aims to end diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in schools and government departments as part of what it describes as a wider crackdown on woke ideology. So, what I meant by a neoliberal sort of like it overtakes everything that is a rising up in social rights. So, it just sort of takes it and makes it into this former husk of itself. Its current husk, actually. And so we think we have like reproductive rights, but now we're having them even less. So we never really got a chance to fix it.